Hello and welcome to another holiday edition of SacTown Talks, wrapping up the end of the year. And one of the things we've noticed this year is a constant theme that, all of us are stuck at home and there's one thing we all need and one thing that a lot of us don't have, and that's a good internet connection. So today we're bringing you a slightly different type of show. And this is one issue that the legislature is going to be confronting next year in 2021 is broadband access for all. There's already been a bond introduced and some legislation introduced for 2021. So we thought we'd take a look back at this constant theme we've heard numerous members address. And so, we know this isn't a new issue, but, the pandemic has kind of exacerbated this and kind of taken on new relevance of the need for, newer, faster, and better broadband access. So today's episode is a look back at those interviews and how this issue has developed over the legislative session from, March until now. From early on, Assemblywoman Aguiar-Curry in Rivas, or Senator Dodd discussing broadband access as a rural issue, or even in LA, where you think it'd be quite plentiful. You have Assemblyman Muratsuchi, member Irwin and McCarty, all talking about this issue, and it was most prominently found in our interview with Senator Gonzalez, where even in the Long Beach area, her internet was so bad that we had to conduct that interview over 3 or 4 times. Just to get through. So, this is not just a rural issue. This is not just, an urban issue. This is a statewide issue that's affecting us all, affecting our work, our ability to go to school. So, we'll take a look back and kind of see how this issue is. We've talked to some experts in this area and kind of the exciting things coming for broadband, with different experts such as 5G and things like that. So, we're going to take a little look back and hope you enjoy these clips and, see what's going on in 2021 on this issue as we roll forward, and hopefully may we all have better and more stable internet connections in the future.
As you can imagine, in January, we all had these aspirations of what could happen, and trying to have vision and trying to be thinking outside the box, and how are we going to move California even farther ahead than anywhere else in the nation, right?
Right.
And then to be hit by the COVID, we really learned some lessons that we weren't prepared. And now we've got to figure out how we're going to get back on our feet. So the meeting at the Assembly the other day gave us an opportunity, I think, to kind of vent. And I'm hoping, and I would imagine the governor's office was paying attention to what were the important things for each one of us. Some people were really specific on what they wanted. I have kept my line is from day one, I'm always into internet or broadband for all, infrastructure, and healthcare. And my bills have always shown that. I did the telehealth bill this year, and that has changed the lives of many people during this pandemic. It is given opportunities for people to go see the doctor without sitting in a doctor's office and maybe getting sick. So the telehealth bill was fabulous. Working on broadband, and I've done that for 12 years probably since I was in Winters, trying to get internet for all.
Right.
And unfortunately, it took a disaster for people to wake up to say, you're right, Cecilia, we do need internet for all. So we passed a bill 3 years ago, and it still hasn't been implemented. And now I'll be doing some policy to force people to do internet for all. I mean, right now, we're looking for job creation, we're looking for training, we're looking for telehealth, we're looking for, you name it, and we're all intertwined on this, on internet. So, I think, I kind of look at this as an opportunity. I want everyone to have a job, don't get me wrong. And that 40% of small businesses are really going to have a tough time getting back on their feet. But I think we have an opportunity if we can get internet everywhere. Because in my small town of Winters, homes were going to be built, and I was on the dais as a mayor, and I said to the developer with a handshake, I said, will you put in the conduit for internet? And he did. And it raised, his houses went for $4,000 more, and now there's families moving into the neighborhoods, and they can work at home. I mean, who would have thought they were going to be working at home? And they're saying, oh my God, I'm so glad to move to this neighborhood. We should have internet at all places. But these small communities should take this as an opportunity because people are going to stay local now. They're not going to be jumping in the car and going to another big town. We need to make sure we have coffee shops and delis and computer repair stores or whatever it might be in your community. So I think we all have to look at it differently, and it can be done. It just has to be creative.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic you brought up about the internet. Growing up in a rural area myself, it was never good. It was always spotty, always going out. Kind of you hearing about these new technologies, 5G, things like that. Is that going to make it easier to implement this internet for all with kind of these wireless internet technologies?
No, I mean, I think people's heart were in the right place, but you need better connectivity than a 5G or a little box. I mean, fiber is by far the best way to go. And we know that that's it. And you're downloading so much information, and you want to be able to make sure that everyone in your household, if they're working at home or taking classes at a JC or university, that they can download their information. So you need really reliable, affordable connectivity. And in our rural areas, as you know, you can watch that little dial spin and spin and spin. And then in the evenings in some small towns, you might have connectivity in the day when kids aren't home watching Netflix. But the minute everyone comes home and starts playing games and stuff, you can just watch your level go down. So it's not a one size fits all. So I just want to make that clear. I think we have to look at everything. So could it be satellite? Could it be 5G? Could it be whatever the case that works in a community? But we've got to embrace it and not say, point the finger at everyone. Let's not point the finger at some of the big vendors. We're all responsible for this. We all need to take action to make sure that everybody has connectivity. And it's not just rural, as much as I'm the big rural gal, and I'll tell everyone about rural. But you know what? There's spots in our urban areas as well that don't have it. And Los Angeles has spots that don't have connectivity. So it can be, we need to have it everywhere. So yeah, it's a big one to me.
One interesting thing recently a member brought up, I guess, from a rural area is the access to broadband. Is that an issue in your district? You know, largely
parts of it, yeah. Yeah, I think, you know, in some of the mountain communities and some of the furthest rural areas where the major providers don't find that it's cost effective to provide that level of infrastructure, that they have come to not just me, but assembly members and other senators asking for ways to increase the opportunity for them to have high-speed internet and fast service, because COVID has changed so many things, but one of them is now it's become much more acceptable for us to engage electronically and through technology. And I don't think that's going to change. So I think when folks need to study from home, kids are being taught at elementary and junior high and even college from home, that the emphasis is going to be, what is our infrastructure like in California? Because we know it's aged. We know that even though we're technologically savvy and advanced as a state and frankly as a nation, our infrastructure is woefully outdated, whether it be roads or broadband or 5G. We need to reinvest in California, and this is a siren's call for us to do what we can to make certain that we prepare for tomorrow today.
It's an interesting point you brought up. I guess the communication and coordination amongst agencies and with the residents as well. One issue that's been brought up recently is, I guess, a lack of broadband access across these rural areas. I guess, you know, what's being done to ensure that, I guess, more of your remote and rural areas are gaining access to broadband, so I guess we can increase communications.
You know, Jared, not enough. I mean, and, you know, we not only see it when we have these big disasters, and it's hard for even our emergency services to coordinate with each other, let alone, hey, I think my mom's, you know, in that fire, I need to call her, and no cell service. So, you know, we've been working on things with the telecommunications company. They don't like to be regulated. There's a number of bills this year on that issue. But look, we're also seeing this because of the COVID-19 situation and the distance learning. You know, if you're in the middle of a city where there's plenty of broadband, you know, you're all good to get on the Zoom call with your kid's class. But boy, if you live, you know, in the hinterland somewhere, or, you know, up in, you know, North Yolo County, or you live in a number of different places in Napa and in Sonoma County, or even in southeastern Solano County, you don't have it. And so it's very, very difficult for those students that live out there to be able to do the online. So if there's ever a critical time where we've got to figure out solutions, it's now. Unfortunately, it's a money game, right? It just, you throw money at enough things, you can get things done. Well, when we're sitting fat, dumb, and happy with a $20 billion surplus, we're perhaps at a point where, we're getting close. Now, this is a huge setback. We talked about the budget at the top of, the show, somewhere between $30 and $54 billion, depending upon whose estimates you agree with. That's it's going to make it very difficult.
Yeah, recently we had a member, Cecilia Aguiar-Curry, on, and she kind of talked about in the rural areas of her county, there's not broadband access, and kind of seeing how your county is probably even more rural than hers, kind of using this new technology, digital medium, is it as effective where you are, and, is access has been a problem, I guess, for your constituents in reaching out to you during this period.
And so I appreciate Cecilia and her leadership. She's a great colleague. She's a great friend, but her leadership that she's brought around the conversation of broadband access, especially in rural areas. We actually carried a bill around expanding access to broadband in rural areas by focusing it on at our most remote fairgrounds in the state. But if anything, in my first term in the legislature, what I've learned to understand is certainly this is a state that's very difficult to govern because we're so large, we're so different, and there's no shortage of a crisis in California. And so how these crises, whether it's a housing crisis or utility crisis, now a public health crisis, it impacts every region of the state very differently. And so if it's anything that this public health crisis we're under now, it has really exacerbated some of these greater challenges. I certainly, coming from a region where I have lived my entire life, I've seen a lot of change. It's considered a suburban rural area. But this public health crisis certainly has exacerbated this issue of distance learning because of the connectivity lack thereof, of access for our rural parts, and that has that is developing an equity issue amongst education and how students aren't on a level playing field when it comes to getting the information and utilizing the technology to get that information to establish a level playing field. And so how that's going to impact educational outcomes for this year and beyond is a huge concern.
I guess as an assemblywoman is one of your jobs, but you're also a mom. And I guess a lot of us parents are kind of wondering, what's school going to look like in this coming school year? Is it going to happen? Is there going to be more distance learning? I guess, is there anything that you can share with us on kind of your thoughts about the upcoming school year and what's it going to look like?
Well, I think parents have had it parents of young children have really have had it extremely difficult in the last few months, especially trying to do the learning at home. My kids they all happen to be in a situation where they've graduated from college already and are going to graduate school, and they're able to study at home. So they have not been affected. What I am really concerned about is, not only the kids, what is it going to look like in September, but how much have we exacerbated the income inequality in the schools that are in areas that are more challenged in my district. They didn't have, good internet conductivity. They didn't have schools. So a lot of the kids didn't even have classes for the last few months. And so I think there's, that is something that we're really going to have to focus on is how do we catch these kids up again? And should they be going back to school? Part of it depends on what we find out from, what are we going to learn about whether the kids are passing COVID on to their parents. There's probably going to be a second spike. We see numbers increasing throughout the state.
Right.
And we really need to know one way or another whether these kids at school are getting sick themselves or are going to get sick. We haven't really seen a lot of young children affected, but also are they passing it on to their parents? Because that was, I think, the main reason for closing down the schools so quickly at the beginning of the crisis. So I think there's they're going to need funding to do distancing at school, but the reality is still that that you're not going to be able to stop all interaction of kids at school.
Right.
And so really trying to learn about, doing what we can to research whether they're going to be passing it on to other family members is really very critical. And making sure that these low income communities that don't have internet connection, we need to make sure that they get it by the fall.
One thing you brought up is the distance learning, and I know different experiences across the state on that. Not everyone has access to broadband or access to, I guess, equipment to distance learn. I guess in your district, were a majority of schools able to provide distance learning, or was that not feasible?
Mm-hmm. So my district, I cover almost the entire representative span of socioeconomic challenges. On the east side of my district is Los Angeles Unified, where about 85% of their students fall into one of the disadvantaged student categories, low income English language learners or foster kids. Almost 85%, more than 85% of LAUSD kids fall into one of those three categories. But on the other end, on the west side of my district, I have districts like Manhattan Beach and Hermosa Beach. Some of the most affluent communities in the state, where they have a much smaller population. About 5% of their population falls into one of those disadvantaged student categories. So, I'm working hard to try to close that digital divide. I've actually been working on a broadband and distance learning bond, so that we not only make sure that we have the broadband infrastructure, the internet speed that's necessary for all kids to be able to make distance learning work, at least from a technological perspective, as well as to make sure that all districts have the devices that they need. So this broadband bond that we've been talking about, where we're trying to make sure that there's enough funding for all school districts to be able to provide the devices that they need to make sure that every child is not at a disadvantage because of these technological needs that we're facing in this new distance learning reality.
We've had a lot of members, as I alluded to earlier, kind of come on and talk about, I guess, the lack of broadband in their area, the digital divide. Can you kind of explain to our listeners, I guess, what the digital divide is?
Sure. Well, let's agree on something. Let's agree that we now live in a world where access to the internet is no longer a luxury, but it's an absolute necessity in order to for us to operate in today's world. And unfortunately, there are many in our communities who do not have the access that they need. And so, for instance, the FCC has recently told us that there are nearly 30 million Americans who cannot reap the benefits of access to the internet for a variety of reasons, mostly because of lack of access to the high-speed internets that they need.
And so kind of as we're getting through this, I guess what's shocking to me is that, we've heard from, I guess, people in rural areas talk about lack of connectivity, which I guess could make sense. It's 2020. We'd hope everyone would have connectivity, but understand why people, in the rural areas might have difficulty with it. But we also hear about people in urban areas where, you think there would be a lot of connectivity. Can you kind of talk to us about, I guess, where these gaps of connectivity are in the state, and I guess what percentage of the state is currently covered by service providers?
Well, first of all, so I mentioned that 30 million Americans don't have the access that they need, and of those 30 million, 80% don't have that reliable high-speed access because they live in rural areas. And so oftentimes we talk about what actually drives that lack of resource for rural areas. And the reality is that up until now, economics has really driven how the infrastructure has been deployed. So oftentimes, because of the long permitting process and the long deployment time it takes to fulfill the fees associated with that, carriers who request the infrastructure, they're mostly focused on high dense areas, oftentimes in business centers or in the center of downtowns. And when it comes to deploying in maybe underserved areas or especially in rural areas, just the difficulty to deploy often prohibits them to do it in those areas. And so, like we talked about before, I think what the pandemic has done is it's really shown a light on how the lack of access to the internet has really started to create what we call that digital divide, or that geographic divide between those who can access it and continue to progress, with their careers or with their lives and even their education, to those who are living in areas that have easy access and fast, reliable internet. And so, yeah, it's continued to be a problem. It's still an issue that we try to address today, and especially now during the pandemic, as folks are trying to figure out how to work remotely or distance learn for the students who are starting back in school. This is a problem that I'm sure not only us, but many legislators are also trying to think through. How do they make sure they close that gap for their constituents?
One thing that I guess has been difficult during this period of time is that everything has gone digital, and it depends on how good or reliable your internet connection is. Earlier this week we had a infrastructure group on who does broadband infrastructure, kind of talking about this digital divide. We've had numerous members kind of come on the show and talk about, I guess, the lack of broadband in rural areas, and especially when working or doing school from home. That's an issue. But I guess one thing that's not present is that even in urban areas such as your district, this is an issue as well. And I guess given your experience at Microsoft and in the tech sector, is this, I guess, an area that you're looking to work on and improve?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, my only bill during this crisis is SB 1130, which is a broadband for all bill, is the way we're coining this. And yes, I actually am the council member when I was in Long Beach that created a digital inclusion plan there. Of course, having worked in the tech sector, especially the tech for good sector, as I like to call it, focusing on equity. Yes, I thought I should absolutely bring this expertise to the state Senate. And so through this bill, that's exactly what we're trying to tackle, which is ensuring that the California Services Fund is truly servicing our urban and rural communities together. We shouldn't have, slow speeds. We shouldn't invest in slow speeds or antiquated technology. We should be looking at future-proof technology. We should be opening up the access to smaller ISPs and local governments. And we should be leveraging dollars from the Federal CARES Act or from the federal government in the grant programs that they have for broadband in order to start investing, not only investing in communities, but ensuring that we're investing with higher speeds, which is what people need. And apparently I may need, because sometimes my internet is slow, and I live in the heart of LA County as well. So we need to do a lot in this regard, especially as kids are distance learning, especially as seniors are on telehealth services. We need to do more. And I think this is a great start.
Yeah. Earlier we had, a group on talking about, I guess, putting in infrastructure. And I guess the one thing that was missing from that conversation is, I guess, who pays for the infrastructure? And, you kind of mentioned this California Services Fund. I guess, can you give us a little background on this California Services Fund? And I guess, give us a little background on, I guess, who actually pays for putting this broadband infrastructure in place?
Sure. So this was actually a bite off of the bill formerly authored by Assembly Member Eddie Garcia from the Coachella Valley. And so he had coined this Internet for All bill, which basically allowed the California Services Fund over a number of years to be able to collect 300 million, which is actually a ratepayer fund. So you pay a surcharge on your cell phone bill, and would go into the California Services Fund. And so it actually ends in 2022. Right now, through this fund, large internet service providers can pay for infrastructure through this fund. The issue is that, especially we see in unserved rural communities, it's very expensive to connect, one or two households over a stretch. And so what we're noticing, and that's why I'm authoring this SB 1130, is that we're not allowing for competition within this California Services Fund. And we're also not prioritizing future-proof technology like fiber, which does cost a little bit more, but it's a better return on investment, in my opinion, to have something that lasts longer than antiquated DSL technology. So the question, though, is how we continue this fund. Do we want to extend the fund and allow ratepayers to have a surcharge beyond 2022? There's been talk of, as you mentioned, an infrastructure bond, maybe sending it to the taxpayers and asking them if they want, to the voters and asking them if they would like to bond this type of infrastructure. But right now, I don't know is the right time. We've got 4 million people on unemployment, and there's a lot to think about in this pandemic. But I think in the meantime, we need to start looking at the California Services Fund's logistics and operations differently while we figure out the funding down the road.
Yeah, that's interesting. I guess one thing that's kind of unclear to me is, how much of the future is wired? Is it fiber cable, or, you hear a lot about 5G, and is it possible to achieve a truly wireless, broadband future?
I think so. I mean, other states have done it. Utah is, looking at in many of their large cities, a broadband for all plan where they're completely fiber. Other countries like South Korea and some of the Norway and some other countries have looked at this, and they're really, many light years ahead of us. We're the 5th largest economy. And so I think right now having these discussions sooner than later and start, looking at ways in which we can be a little bit more progressive in our thinking of how this fund is used, and perhaps funding on top of that, then I think we're in a good place, because we're going to be in this pandemic, unfortunately, for a while. And we need to have a solution as to kids, how they can improve their homework, not just through a smartphone or not just going through a Starbucks, but how they can actually have Wi-Fi in their home that's reliable. Business owners that need to get back up and running, reliable. We need telehealth services, reliable service for seniors. I mean, we can't continue to have what we have now, which is low speeds at high costs and with antiquated technology. It's just not fair.
Right. I know time's running short and you got to go. But I just wanted to ask you one more question, about kind of distance learning here locally. Do you see when your constituency, do they have the necessary, broadband access and devices to enable distance learning to be effective?
They don't. I think that's one, failure on us in this distance learning, is that some families, their internet access is their mom's phone. You can't really see it right here on the screen.
Right.
Their mom's either Android or whatever they have. That's their internet access. Doesn't always work. Maybe you have 3 and 4 kids in the household and school. You're sharing the computer. So that's something that we really, really need to step up and make sure, because otherwise it's totally unfair. How are some kids going to learn, without the tools in the toolbox? It's like telling some kids, 30 years ago, once you do your homework, you don't even have a pencil or a pen to do your work. So we're working on that. I know some of these tech companies in California have stepped up and providing free and very low cost internet service. I think that's a big boost. The computers don't seem to be the issue. I think most school districts have computers, have given them out to their students, or they have access to buy more. The issue we're seeing more and more is the internet access.
Wow.
And then
last time we were on, we were having a great conversation, but we actually got disconnected because of broadband issues for anyone who listened before.
Yeah.
I guess circling back, that's been kind of a big issue coming lately, as we're all at home, we're all distance learning. I've even experienced it, with my kids and at the school. It was a funny story. The first day of school, all the teachers, started Zooming, live broadcasting from the same school at the same point. And everyone was blurry and didn't really work because it was just too much bandwidth going on at one time. And so, even though schools have had 6 months to kind of adjust to this and kind of up their bandwidth, it's still not enough. So I can't imagine, how this is affecting, schools across the state. And, this is something that, is near and dear to your heart. And so kind of wanted to touch base with you again and kind of talk a little bit about kind of broadband and kind of touch base on kind of SB 1130 and kind of what's the latest with that and kind of your plans for broadband for all.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we see it, of course, being a mom myself with 3 boys, working from home. My husband works from home, just like every other Californian that we're hearing about, and even really every other American. The same thing. We have the same struggle. Distance learning is working for some kids that have good internet speed, and it's not working for some kids that may not have the resources to pay for that high internet speed. It's also an issue of telehealth services. We're seeing more seniors that are actually liking telehealth. So talking to many of my community clinics, and they're seeing now the digital inequities that are happening with seniors that may not have the adequate broadband speeds. And so we're seeing it in very different elements. SB 1130 looked at just one particular fund, which was the California Services Fund, to be able to look at faster speeds for investments, for California ratepayer investments. Faster speeds, opportunities for local governments to apply for grants through the fund, ensuring that there was an open access regime to allow more competition, like smaller internet service providers to now be a part of the investments. It had all of these different new ideas, but it was certainly warranted because we were in this age of COVID where we need to start talking about this. And this bill was actually brought up back in February before COVID hit. We had sort of an idea to bring this forward. And then when COVID hit, it just made the issue even more important. And so we're going to continue to push. It unfortunately didn't make it through the legislature. It was sort of just died in the assembly, unfortunately. But we're going to have discussions throughout the fall and continue the conversation for next legislative year to ensure that we continue to keep broadband at the forefront.
Kind of what were, I guess, some of the hurdles you encountered in the assembly, and kind of what do you think is going to help to overcome this next year?
That's a great question. I think coming in as a new member, I had been working on digital inclusion policy before, but not at the state level. And so understanding, I wanted to come in with a completely collaborative approach that rural communities and urban communities oftentimes were looked at or we're working on things in silos when we should actually be collaborating. Because you're in a rural community and don't have access, well, we feel the same thing in LA in some cases. There are some places in my district in unincorporated Los Angeles that have zero access to the internet. And if they do have access, just like a rural community, sometimes it's a very slow speeds. So it doesn't even matter if you have internet because you're not going to be able to download or upload anything as a student, as a teacher, et cetera. And so I think I want to be able to continue to come in with this collaborative approach that this is a rural and urban solution, and that we need everybody at the table, stakeholders everywhere, to ensure that we get to the right point with investment and talking about how we could be better invested in by these larger companies, and also look for ways to innovate with smaller internet service providers that would like to come to the table and be a part of the discussion as well.
I know the governor released an executive order kind of dealing with kind of broadband and some of these issues. Can you kind of explain to us kind of what that executive order did, and does that connect at all to kind of what you're trying to do as well?
Yeah, it actually really did connect. And we had been in conversations with the administration quite frequently throughout SB 1130's sort of life through the legislature. And a lot of what the executive order did was, for instance, put a goal of 100 megabits download speed, which is exactly what SB 1130 did as well. We said any investment that happens with California Service Fund dollars should be high speeds, and we would like a goal of 100 upload, 100 download, but the minimum requirement should be 25. The executive order said, yes, 100 is a good goal. He also brought into play the state participating in a broadband action plan and getting that done by the end of the year. That would be done by the Department of Technology in coordination with the PUC, and finding ways that the state could become more innovative with deployment and accessibility for broadband. And then also promoting what federal sort of grant opportunities might be out there for local governments to start participating in. For instance, the FCC just announced a few months ago, I believe it's $20 billion grant for rural communities. And so a lot of people don't know about that unless you kind of dig in through, you're doing a lot of research. So we need to be able to, as a state, promote those grants, even if it's not funneled through us. So at least local governments have an opportunity to directly apply for those grants, and it's easily accessible and available and just easy to hopefully win and be granted.
Has there ever been, I guess, a look statewide to see, I guess, how much it would cost to kind of, bring broadband to everyone? Do you know if there's ever been kind of like a LAO report or some sort of independent group that kind of would look at the cost and see, how much, how far do we have to go before, we can reach some of these goals?
Yeah, I mean, I believe there has been through the LAO. I don't think there's anything been done that has been done recently. And so I'm hoping that this action plan will look at sort of even some preliminary economic assessments. I've heard anywhere from like 2 to 3 billion. I've heard more than that. I've heard less, but we need a really good, to your point, it's a great point. We need an actual economic analysis to see what this could cost, and also how we can leverage our private, private dollars with many of the relationships that we have, as well as federal investment as well through additional CARES Act funding, or like we said, these additional FCC grants that could complement what we're doing in the state through the California Services Fund, or extending the fund. It's going to be the ratepayers will stop paying per legislation by 2022. So if we were able to extend that fund or extend the rate through the California Services Fund, that may be able to garner some more investment for leveraging.
One thing I was thinking of is, because of COVID, a lot of people are staying home, working from home. You're seeing companies just completely shift the paradigm and getting rid of office space. Pinterest just announced they're getting rid of their office space. A lot of big companies are selling their, offices and just telling their employees to stay home. And it's kind of, we've said this before, but, there's less community. People are driving less. So I guess there's kind of a relationship now between broadband and greenhouse gas and emissions, and the incentive of people not commuting and keeping people home. I guess, is that something that you could look at, is kind of looking at greenhouse gas emission funding to kind of help fund this broadband for all?
That's a great point. I have heard of that, and we're looking at all sort of creative options, and it is a really good parallel, because we are starting to see that small businesses, large businesses are changing their business models, and you're right, they're looking at the operational costs that they can save and what else they can invest in, whether that's Wi-Fi hotspots, or helping the large tech companies potentially being able to help with this sort of broadband initiative overall through this for the state would be so key in what we're trying to do, and also being able to be at the forefront at lowering our greenhouse gas emissions. I think that would be a great compliment and great idea. You just thought of my next bill idea. Fantastic.
Something we keep hearing about, is 5G, and about how 5G is going to be this great kind of game-changing technology coming out. I guess, is the future of broadband for all possibly wireless? Is that possible, or do you think a wired infrastructure is still the way to go?
I think we have to think larger than that, right? I mean, wireless. I was just talking to actually a member of IBEW who is saying the same exact thing. 5G is kind of our big initiative to get to, except for the fact that a lot of international markets are beyond that. And they're thinking larger and bigger, and they're at these international forums exchanging ideas. And I would just hope that one day we could be there and start thinking a little bit larger of what our technology infrastructure could be. Right now, we still have DSL, we still have copper wires. I mean, we're still very much antiquated. So I think disrupting that system, like any tech person would say, is what we need to be able to do to start making headway with the digital divide in this environment.
Kind of, we're just kind of touching. So we know a large part of your legislative package was put on hold because of COVID. Kind of bringing that forward to next year. Kind of, what are your plans for next year, and kind of what are you working on right now?
Well, surprise, broadband. I will continue that effort. I told a lot of my staff and many of my colleagues, I said, you will be tired of me talking about broadband until we actually get some valuable and significant legislation done that would be bicameral and collaborative and all of that from up and down the state. So of course, broadband will be important. And then also other tech kind of for good issues. I think in addition to broadband, we have to start thinking about the digital divide, but also digital literacy programs that will complement that. There's so much more that comes after just the infrastructure that you can focus on.
And to close out the episode, we have a sneak peek at our first episode of 2021 with Assemblyman Laura Friedman. Check out that episode on January 8th. And thank you for listening to this special episode of SacTown Talks. Thanks to all our listeners over the past year as the show has evolved and grown. Hopefully gotten a little bit better for you out there. Remember to smash that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Stay safe and healthy over the holiday break, and we'll see you in 2021.
And yet I'm in such a better position than so many of my constituents. We are able to put food on our table. We have a roof over our heads. I'm not housing insecure right now. So, I think about the people out there that are struggling with all of this, plus they don't know where the next paycheck is coming from. Thinking about $600 is not going to put food on their table and pay for their rent in Los Angeles. So I've got a lot of people that are struggling and suffering who never went through this before. We've had calls in our office from people who are looking for assistance with food, who have never used social services a day in their life. People who were from the entertainment industry, who were freelancers, who were grips, who are makeup artists, senior citizens who say things to me like, I know you have people who are so worse off, but I'm scared to get on the bus to go and get food because I'm scared of getting COVID. What do I do? And our job has been to try to connect people with services. And we have an incredibly generous district. I did a toy and food drive this week. I had 2 staffers with me, or 3 staffers, and we thought that we'd be able to have enough stuff to throw in the back of one of the staffers' mother's pickup truck. Well, we got so many donations that we spent 3 or 4 hours just moving them to the office, back and forth, filling up this truck over and over and over again. We had a line of cars coming in to drop off donations. People, we would open the trunk and they would say, we just went and bought you an entire trunkload of groceries. And these are not people who are rich looking. These are just ordinary people who really want to help. People said, I normally go and visit my family and I can't this year. So I took that extra money and I bought donations to go to our homeless shelters and to go to people who can't buy a toy for their kids. And it was so moving, I can't even tell you. So we are struggling. People are struggling, but we also have a community that's incredibly generous. And I think that we're going to get through this.
Are called dreamers.